So I figured that walking through the entirety of the Kinks' lengthy career would take too long, and it's mostly unnecessary, as I'm sure most people watching this will at least know their early hits. So I thought it might instead be more interesting to tell their story in relation to some specific aspects of Ray's writing through some of my favourite Kinks songs, or at least my favourite ones that are less well known, slightly at least. And it's worth noting that the Kinks' biggest hits are all incredible, and I will never ever get sick of hearing them, which is something I can't always say about the Beatles. So we all know the Davis brothers grew up in the district of Fortis Green in Muswell Hill, in a large working class family steeped in music of all kinds. Their first lineup formed somewhere around 1962 with school friend Pete Quaife on bass, and by the time Mick Avery had joined, they had settled on a permanent name in the Kinks, which is admirably subversive considering the time period and the name's deliberate connotations. Not entirely unrelated to their personally fluid attitudes towards sexuality in their songs and their lives, especially Dave's. They signed to Pie Records in 1964, and their third single, You Really Got Me, finally broke through, and the Kinks became a very serious concern indeed. For sheer raw energy, it eclipses anything the Beatles, the Stones, or anyone else was doing in Britain at the time, for my money. And being the shrewd operator he is, Ray quite rightly recognised a winning formula when he heard it, which is why so many of their early tunes are basically rewrites of You Really Got Me. And I mean that in the best possible way. Because the formula here, other than the sound of the record, which can be boiled down to the involvement of producer Shel Talmy, the use of session drummers instead of Mick Avery, and the likely apocryphal tale of Dave Davis slashing his guitar amplifier speaker cone with a knife to get the requisite distortion for his guitar, is the combination of direct, to-the-point, basic lyrics, and through generating excitement with the use of key changes in the song. So when You Really Got Me, it goes from the key of G, and then builds excitement by going a tone up to the key of A. Yeah, you really got me now. And then eventually up to D. And then in a song like All Day and All the Night, we've got the same thing, also in the key of G. Going from there to by your side, going up again a tone to A, and up to D. The exact same trick. And then there's I Need You, which is a lesser known banger from the earlier period that more or less does the same thing again. Started from G, I need you. Then it goes up to A to build the excitement. If you ever tell me goodbye, I'll break down and you'll hear me cry. I need you, up a whole octave. Don't anybody else and needed anyone before. Yet another track that repeats this trick is Everybody's Gonna Be Happy, and likely countless others from the first few years of their career. A personal favourite of their raucous rock and roll period for me also is Till the End of the Day. Interesting in that, yes, it's also riff rock perfection, but its minor key gives it an underlying edge of darkness, suggesting that Ray's lust for life, as expressed in the lyric, comes with a tongue in the cheek, if not a gun to the head. Oh baby, I feel good from the moment I rise. Feel good from the morning to the end of the day. Something also about the verse of this song, which is just so much fun to play as a rhythm guitarist. Makes me think I would love nothing more than to be a Dave Davis in a Kinks cover band. Just how joyous it is to play all this stuff. And on top of that, it's worth saying I think Dave Davis is an excellent guitarist for what the Kinks are, and he is severely undervalued and underappreciated as a 60s guitar god. It also makes it all the more baffling that then session man Jimmy Page played on so many of their early tracks, to the point that it's now unclear what is him and what is Dave. As well as the Kinks frequently using session musicians, their first 3 albums, at least those released originally in the UK and are therefore considered canon, are also products of their time, which is to say they are more or less vehicles for their singles, padded out with covers and with the album tracks not typically produced with the same attention to rawness and power that the singles of the time were. Naturally. Nothing unusual for the time. Ray really hit his songwriting stride and started shitting miracles with 1966's Face to Face, which for me is the point where their albums really start becoming coherent and worthy of study. And it marks the point where Ray distinctly dropped the riff rock in favour of 2 new types of song. the novelty song and the melancholy mid-tempo ballad. Now, novelty songs usually annoy me when they are done by the Beatles, the Small Faces, or The Who. But I can't think of any artist who so thoroughly folded the novelty song into their style as effectively as the Kinks. Probably because they are so unself-conscious and laced with irony and social satire. Early on, this came in the amusing form of songs like the Cod Calypso, I'm on an Island, and Sitting on My Sofa, a song about, you guessed it, sitting on your sofa. On Face to Face, they do daft, cutesy music hall in songs like Dandy or Session Man, and they put out several iconic singles in this vein also with Dedicated Follower of Fashion and Mr. Pleasant around this time. Songs that sound ridiculously dated now, even if the lyrics still have a real satirical bite to them. Something he also continued to do at this time, like he did with the band's early riff rock singles, was effectively rewrite the same song again and again. And far from being a negative, the fact that Sunny Afternoon, Dead End Street, and Autumn Almanac are conceptually more or less the same doesn't take anything away from the fact that they are indeed all absolutely perfect songs. In fact, some of Autumn Almanac is simply a different Kinks song played backwards, according to Ray. Such was his habit of recycling ideas. In 1967, at the height of Technicolor flower power psychedelia, the Kinks predictably went against the grain with the austere black and white Victoriana of Something Else, again laden with deliberately English twee songs like Tin Soldier Man and Afternoon Tea. But where Ray really came into his own here is with the mid-tempo melancholy ballad, and perhaps his single greatest achievement in this direction is, of course, the immortal Waterloo Sunset. The song described by hugely influential music critic Robert Christgau as the most beautiful song in the English language, and it's pretty hard to argue with that. As a Londoner, I don't think there's a single better way to experience and understand this city than to travel south across Waterloo Bridge, as I did almost every day for several years, with the sad majesty of Waterloo Sunset ringing in your ears. The mood of lonely optimism that Ray captures in that song is really impossible to accurately describe, and he thinks it sucks. An enormous and unrecognised aspect of so many of the Kinks' most iconic period in the mid to late 60s is the presence of his wife Rasa on backing vocals. Indeed, she was their secret sauce. A German-born Lithuanian whose family fled the Soviet Union to their new home in England, Rasa Diepetris married Ray in 1964, and her ghostly high harmonies are all over the Kinks records of this time. The degree to which she also contributed to the band's songs compositionally is the subject of much debate. And the breakup of her marriage to Ray in 1973, Ray's notorious stinginess, and the prevailing sexist culture of the time means that she was unfortunately more or less airbrushed out of the Kinks' history. What is certain is that she was quite hard done by, and I really don't think it's a coincidence that Ray's greatest work occurred when he was collaborating, one way or the other, with his wife. She was also the inspiration behind one of my favourites and an early example of Ray's uncanny ability to capture sadness and longing, his 1965 demo for I Go to Sleep.
Though you are far away, I know you'll always be near to me. I go to sleep, sleep, and imagine that you're there with me.
There's really something in the way the music so perfectly reflects the theme of the lyric, a consistent feature of Ray's songwriting, and extremely powerful in that he will very often shift gears mid-song in a way that is as disarming as it is emotionally devastating.
You took my life, but then I knew that very soon you'd leave me. But it's alright, now I'm not frightened of this world, believe me. I wish today could be tomorrow. The night is dark, it just brings sorrow, let it weigh.
That song, their 1968 single Days, marked the end of Ray's perfect run of singles, with the later exception of Lola, with its somewhat surprise success. And around this time, the Kinks' albums were failing to capture the record-buying public. It's worth saying as well that as a performing entity, the Kinks were blacklisted in the US between 1965 and 1969 over union issues, and Ray had his first major nervous breakdown in 1966. From a songwriting perspective, both of these events caused Ray to look ever inward for inspiration. While not a through-and-through concept album, Sgt. Pepper kind of blew the doors off in the previous year as far as normalising the idea of the album as a piece of high art. So while the Kinks' 1968 masterpiece, The Kinks Are the Village Green Preservation Society, doesn't exactly try to tell a story, it is very much a collection of songs based around a singular theme, and I personally think it's all the better for it. And even if it more or less completely bombed on release in 1968, the way it so perfectly captures the mood of inward-looking nostalgia is the reason it is so highly regarded as the hipster Kinks album of choice. And with good reason. In fact, my angle for this video was always going to be Arthur is better than Village Green, mostly for clickbait reasons. And ahead of time, I dreamed up a few justifications for taking that position. But just to refresh myself for writing this, I happened to walk my dog around Clissold Park while listening to Village Green, and its amazingness kind of threw a spanner into my plans. There's really no other way to put it. Village Green really is just so good. I do genuinely like Arthur more, but there's barely a cigarette paper between them. I remember the opening track grabbing me instantly when I first heard it. I would even say within the first 30 seconds, the listener can get immediately what the album is, conceptually, so concise that it is. Do You Remember Walter is a personal favourite of mine on this record, a superficially jaunty arrangement that is underneath a devastating comment on lost friendships over time.
I bet you're fat and married and you're always home in bed by 8:30. And if I talked about the old times, you get bored and you'd have nothing more to say. Yes, people often change, but memories of people can remain.
That last line there basically summarising the entire premise of Village Green. The idea of the world as you know it, slipping through your fingers. And we are left only with snapshots, fleeting memories of people and places long gone. So maybe we'd be wise to savour them more than we perhaps do. The next track, Picture Book, is a lot of fun and obviously carries on with this theme and was subsequently ripped off by both Green Day and Mac DeMarco. Johnny Thunder was ripped off by Paul Weller of The Jam, and in all fairness, it and the next track, The Last of the Steam-Powered Trains, were going to be examples of weaker tracks that personally I don't quite enjoy as much as the others. They are nonetheless thematically and musically pretty top-notch, even if I don't quite jive with them as much. Big Sky is a lovely bit of Ogden's Nut Gone Flake style psych. I won't go on too much more other than to say that Animal Farm and the song Village Green itself really represent the heart of this album, and as ever, these seemingly novel and purposeful songs are laced with a desperate sadness.
I miss the Village Green and all the simple people. I miss the Village Green, the church, the club, the steeple. I miss the morning dew, fresh air and Sunday school. And
Overall, Village Green really captures a small town, parochial, small C conservatism that of course was never going to play well with the hippie generation. And I suppose personally, it took me a long time to understand that a band of working class socialists might take this position, such as the meaning of these terms shifted over the years. But subtlety and nuance do not make bank, and the Kinks Are the Village Green Preservation Society marked the beginning of a decade-long commercial slump for the band, at least as far as album sales were concerned. While it was not helped in any small part by Ray pulling the release at the last minute over track listing concerns and its lack of an obvious single, its failure said more about the Kinks as men out of time, with a long-haired, pot-smoking public showing little enthusiasm for songs about steam trains, China cups and virginity. Additionally, it was eventually released literally on the same day as the Beatles' blockbuster White Album and about a week before the Stones' Beggar's Banquet, which didn't help. And further to that, the Kinks in the public consciousness were simply not considered serious, zeitgeisty heavy hitters like the Stones or the Beatles anyway. Of course, it's now considered their greatest effort in many quarters, and incredibly, eventually, due to its cult status, their bestseller. But at the time, it must have felt like the Kinks were lurching from disaster to disaster, with original bassist Pete Quaife permanently leaving the band about 4 months after Village Green's release to be replaced by John Dalton, who had previously filled in for Pete following a car accident in 1966, and therefore was an obvious choice for the role. Now as for the artwork, Arthur was released literally the same week as Monty Python's Flying Circus had its television debut. So I imagine any similarity between Terry Gilliam's cutout animation for that show and Bob Laurie's design for Arthur is pure coincidence. Either way, I personally really love the style, and it screams Britain in 1969, as far as I'm concerned. And it's nice to think there was a degree of aesthetic synergy in the culture at the time, for what it's worth. Having finally negotiated an agreement with the American Federation of Musicians Union to end the Kinks' US touring ban, The release of Arthur set the stage for the Kinks' American comeback, and in all fairness, Arthur sold reasonably well stateside, certainly better than in their homeland. Victoria was the album's most successful single in both markets, peaking at 62 in the US and 30 in the UK. Critically, it was similarly far more highly regarded in the States. The tour, however, did not go particularly well, but they almost by accident regained a foothold in the US with the surprise success of 1970's Lola Versus Powerman and the Money Go Round, especially its hit single, Lola. The half of this album that I really love. Strangers is Dave's greatest achievement as a songwriter, and This Time Tomorrow and A Long Way From Home can still bring a tear to my cynical eye. All the satirical, bitchy songs about how much Ray hates the music industry, however, are garbage for the most part, in my opinion. All in all, a transitional album. In 1971, they did the soundtrack to Percy, a rather demented sex comedy about a penis transplant. God's Children is a lovely song from this, but it's not really substantial as a standalone album. Towards the end of the same year, the Kinks' golden era came to a spectacular close with their 10th album, the classic Muswell Hillbillies. Intended as their country album, it's also equal parts music hall, trad jazz, and mid-tempo, hard-driving 70s rock. It was also deliberately all recorded with vintage mics, giving it a very specific, smoky atmosphere, and is otherwise dominated by the horns of the Mike Cotton sound. Definitely worth checking out for those who don't know it. Of the 14 albums released between 1972 and their eventual breakup in 1994, I'm only slightly ashamed to admit that I've barely heard any of them. I can't think of many other bands I adore anywhere near as much as I adore the Kinks, who also have such a large part of their catalogue that so disinterests me. Possibly the Rolling Stones, or the Beach Boys maybe. The song Celluloid Heroes is really the only thing I can think of. Mega fans will not be impressed by that, of course, but hey, I'm not going to lie to you. Their mid-70s theatrical era is for the most part pretty camp and embarrassing, and the atmosphere within the band was all pretty toxic as well. More toxic than usual, I should say, reaching a grim crescendo when Ray announced the end of the Kinks from the stage at White City in 1973, before subsequently collapsing from a drug overdose. Recovering from that, over the next decade, they gradually rebuilt a large following in the USA, touring endlessly and putting out albums of mixed quality. On the commercial downward slope yet again, the Kinks soldiered on and enjoyed a period of elder statesman adoration during the Britpop years of the 1990s, before eventually calling it quits. If you liked this video, please do me a favour and hit the like button, but if you didn't, rather than hit the dislike button, can I suggest you leave a comment and let me know why? I'm always open to feedback, advice, and opinions that challenge mine, plus it apparently helps me game YouTube's algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it will let you know whenever I put something new up. You can follow me on all the socials if you're so inclined, and if you'd like to incentivize me with a $5 a month to continue doing these videos, a link to my Patreon should be just beneath this video. Cheers.